Qualitative Research, Introduction and Overview. In this short portion of the presentation, I want to talk about data collection. We've discussed this sort of already when we're looking at different designs, and obviously by talking about some of the different data that we may have, we kind of understand what the collection may be. Data collection in qualitative research is not just sitting down and talking to somebody and seeing what they say and what was important to them. There's more to it than that. It does need to be fairly structured and have a purpose. It can't just be a fishing expedition. So what I want to talk about here is some of the methods that are used for collecting the data. In subsequent presentations, we're also going to look at then, once that's collected, what do you do with it? Because often in qualitative research, this is one reason I like quantitative better, is you have huge amounts of data to go through and that you have to make sense of. Versus in quantitative research, where you have very specific defined measurements you're taking, and then how to evaluate them is fairly straightforward. So when it comes to qualitative data collection, typically the researcher is making some type of observation. So they are capturing what they see and what they hear as the event occurs, or they're looking at documents and data that they've gathered after the fact. Observation, kind of creepy, right? It's you would be observing the person potentially when the event occurs or the people. These observations can be covert or overt. Covert meaning that you are, a role in the group, but you do not conceal that you're actually gathering information about them. So you're like a plant into the population. Or you may observe while you're hiding your physical presence. There's a lot of studies in psychology where the researchers are observing behavior of the subjects behind a glass. That's what you're kind of doing here. And you're kind of watching to see what they do, how they react to particular situations, and so on. Examples of this might be, again, studies where I've seen individuals, the researchers are interested in what is the warm-up routine for, a particular group of athletes, for, Olympic athletes. Do they follow a similar warm-up routine that may indicate that others should follow a similar warm-up routine, or somehow that conveys some positive benefits? The researcher can do this by just watching from afar, measuring how many times they stretch different muscles, etc. And that would be an example of observations that would be used in a qualitative type of study. Now, they can observe, obviously, covertly or overtly, where the purpose of the research is disclosed. The participants might be, one of the observers might be a participant, or and so on. The issues, obviously, between covert and overt observation is there is always a chance, if people know they're being watched, that they behave differently. And you have to weigh those options and so on, and whether or not it's possible. But you will see observations that are either made directly by the researcher as part of the group, with or without the knowledge of the participants. Another way that we collect data in quantitative studies potentially is by interviews. And this is what most people think of when they think about qualitative research, is that you interview participants and you ask them about their experiences. So interviews can uncover more than just watching the people behave can. If I watch a group of people during, their warm-up, and I track, what muscles did they stretch, how much time did they spend stretching, I observe different aspects of their behavior in that respect. That can be very useful, but I can gain further information by also asking them after the fact a bunch of questions. Why did you stretch those muscles? Maybe they stretch it because they have a history of hamstring injury. Maybe they were told to do it by their coach. Again, so these interviews can uncover things that just plain observation may not be able to do. It uncovers how people feel, how they think, how they make sense of events, etc. It really brings in a real unique perspective from the individuals, because it allows us to get a better understanding of how their gender, their past experiences, their culture all of those different things maybe feed into how they behave. And especially the researcher may not understand those things because they may be from different groups and not understand that background and how that affects their behavior. So it gives us a real rich and amount of information that we maybe wouldn't get just by observing alone. Interviews allow us to gain access to information that may not be uncovered in a survey or by observation and so on. Often interviews are going to give us a lot more open-ended questions that allow the actors to really expand upon their thoughts, their feelings, and so on. Questions are open-ended. Not that we can't have closed-ended questions too, but they allow the interviewee to determine the direction of the responses and how they want to respond, which it has quite a bit of value to the researcher. They can be interviews of individuals, or they can be group interviews. Often those are called focus groups, where you get a bunch of people together, all from that same group, and you ask them questions and see how they respond. Advantages and disadvantages to focus groups, obviously. You might get one person that's very vocal and therefore drowns out the ideas and feelings of others. But again, it's a way to get a lot of people interviewed in a shorter period of time. Often in the interviews, and almost always, they're going to be recorded, whether they're video recordings or audio recordings, and then transcribed so that the researcher can see written, what were the words used, what were phrases, what were some of the different things that maybe came up more commonly. And really transcribing them allows you to do a lot more kind of statistical analysis to look for those types of themes that may appear over and over and over. There are different types of interviews. They include unstructured interviews where you really just ask very broad, open-ended questions. Tell me about the event. Why did you act the way you did? Very open types of questions. Often though, and most often you're going to see that the interviews are semi-structured or structured. And what that means is that you have a series of questions or a series of different aspects of the experience that you want to ask the person about. Sometimes they are structured completely, where you are asking questions directly. You only ask the questions that are on your list and so on. So there are a wide range of different types of ways that interviews are going to be structured and so on. In the example that I've given you, they used a semi-structured interview structure. So they had set questions that they asked everybody, but then dependent upon their responses, the researcher could ask follow-up questions to gain further information and so on. Question types in interviews typically are grouped in terms of the general type of information they're gathering. And they can include, obviously, descriptive type of questions, structural questions, contrast questions where you're asking people to compare things, but also often assess things like behavior, value or opinion, knowledge of a particular area, sensory, how they made sense of a different event, what sensations they had, and background demographic questions. Typically, questions of a similar type are going to be grouped together in these interviews. Other types of data collection in quantitative or qualitative research include documents, which could include text, written documents, personal documents, emails, texts, and again, any other type of communication. They also can include official documents from an organization at which the person works and so on. The nice thing about document data collection is it's an unobtrusive way to get information from particular actors and is timely. It's documents that are written at the time of the event or the phenomena that you're interested in studying. Discourses, which can be written or spoken type of documents, also can be utilized. And often these are deeply examined, looking at choices of words, ordering of sentences, and so on. You can find very interesting qualitative examination of the best speeches that have been produced by different individuals, and where the researchers are attempting to come up with even why individuals chose specific words in particular sentences. to potentially bring about a specific event or effect, and or highlighting, again, a recent experience that they've had. So we see that data collection can occur from a wide range of sources in qualitative research, and often multiple sources are included.